The state of Florida is home to 1.6 million Cuban Americans, the largest Cuban diaspora in the world. For years, this community was protected by a unique law that allowed them to obtain a green card after just 1 year in the United States. But today, Cubans are no longer an exception under Donald Trump.
The policies of this government are shutting down even legal ways to come to the United States or to remain in the United States, not only for people who enter here legally, but also for people who enter crossing the border and now are applying for asylum.
Asylum is what Ludmila Marcelo's client is requesting at a hearing at an immigration court in Miami.
I already explained to these clients what is going to happen. The possibility of the pretermission based on Ecuador agreement with the United States, and that the only way to avoid that is going to be appealing as soon as possible.
Ever since Trump's return to office, many asylum claims have been dismissed without a hearing on the grounds that migrants could seek protection in other countries. We cannot enter the courtroom, but Marcelo meets us again after the hearing.
The judge was sympathetic. He told her that she needs to appeal in order to her removal order to not be active.
But the appeals process can take up to 2 years. 2 years during which this woman can be detained by ICE despite a pending court decision. Marcelo, who is Cuban American, says the current climate is frustrating.
As an immigrant myself, I get frustrated when all immigrants are treated the same, like criminals.
But the situation is even worse for Cubans who came to the U.S. legally and are hoping to adjust their status. They can be sent back to Cuba because a pending adjustment does not grant legal status. Over 100,000 people in this legal limbo are believed to be living in the United States. We were able to meet with one of them. He arrived in 2023 after crossing through 4 countries.
Cuando tuvimos la posibilidad por medio de una aplicación,
when we came, we saw that there was an app. We signed up and waited for our appointment. When the date came, we went legally to a port of entry. Authorities inspected us, questioned us, and then admitted us on the condition that we could stay in the country for 2 years with a work permit. But now, with this new government, they've labeled us not only as undocumented, but as criminals, even though we haven't committed any crime and did exactly what the government asked in order to enter the country legally.
Y solamente por haber hecho lo que el propio gobierno nos había pedido para poder entrar al país de manera legal.
This man made the decision to leave Cuba after the protests of July 2021 and the crackdown that followed. He never thought he would end up living in fear after giving up everything.
We had to sell almost everything we had, and even then, we barely managed to scrape together enough money. If tomorrow, God forbid, we had to go back to Cuba, we would have nothing left. So we live in fear. We wake up with fear. We go to work with fear. Your child goes to school and you're afraid. You go to the hospital and you're afraid. Because everywhere you go, people ask you for your immigration status. Sometimes it's just routine, but you never know if it's the moment immigration will show up to arrest you and separate you from your family.
Living in fear and receiving rare support from the Cuban American community, which is overwhelmingly Republican.
Para nosotros que acabamos de llegar, no lo podemos entender.
For those of us who have just arrived, it's incomprehensible. I'd like to know why they support this administration, why they think we shouldn't be here when they are. They've forgotten where they came from, why they emigrated, how they got here.
The first Cuban exiles came to the U.S. after the revolution in 1959. The country welcomed them as refugees from communism.
This was us with my grandparents in Cuba. That's my mother, my grandmother, and me with my first Holy Communion. This was in Varadero.
Alicia Peláez was brought to the U.S. by Operation Peter Pan in 1960, a secret Catholic program that resettled around 14,000 young Cubans without their parents, who feared children would be sent to indoctrination camps.
They went little by little. They would take away, private businesses. They would take away your land. So when it came to the law to take away the kids and send them to the camps, You know, you could imagine that they were going to do it. Sooner or later, we have had to come. There was no way of staying.
No camps were ever built, but since then, Cuban Americans have remained close to the Republican Party, seen as taking a tougher stance against the Castro regime, but not Alicia, one of the rare voices of her generation to reject that allegiance.
They don't realize that so many programs here were done by the Democrats. Things they have nowadays is because of the Democrats. But to them, they're communist. They forget how they were welcome, how they became prosperous, and they're not showing that towards now, what's happening now.
For many Cuban Americans, a hard line against Havana matters more than immigration, a paradox for a community built entirely on exile. Since 2021, 850,000 people have left the island for the U.S., all dreaming, like those who came before them, of a free Cuba.